Thanks for joining us on another For Investors, By Investors South Bay podcast. As always, we are proud to be your all-education real estate investment resource without any kind of sales pitch. If you would like to attend one of our meetings in person, we meet the second Wednesday of the month at The Point in El Segundo. You can RSVP at forinvestorsbyinvestors.com/South Bay. To find more investment resources such as blogs and podcasts from other FIBI groups, go to forinvestorsbyinvestors.com and search our library. Now, on to the podcast.
So I do want to acknowledge a few of our sponsors. Walker Dunlop is a commercial lender, and UDirect IRA actually, here we go. We've got Jeff back here with UDirect IRA. They are a self-directed IRA company. Yes, you can use your retirement account to invest in real estate. If you want to know why, ask Jeff, or how, ask Jeff. New Western is here we go, right over here. We got some guys from New Western. These guys are a wholesaling company on steroids. Is that a good way?
That's a great way.
It's a great way of saying it. Very, very tech-based platform for helping identify properties. So if you're looking for properties, you want to look at a wholesale deal, check these guys out. The Note Assistance Program, I don't see Jasmine or Natasha here. They are a company that specializes in investing in debt, so looking at real estate debt, buying notes. We also have Civic. I don't see anyone from Civic here. They're a hard money lender that specializes in both residential and multifamily. Spear Woodward is a local real estate firm. And all of them have information on the back table. So if you need a referral for any of them, you can grab their card. If you need referrals for anyone else, please let me know. We'll certainly find good people to help you out. Who here attended our Intelligent Investors Conference this past weekend? I know we've got a handful of people here. So yeah, including these two guys. Andrew here spoke on a panel on Sunday, and some of the questions that were at that panel are actually on our list for tonight. So we had a great conference. I know we've been talking about it for a few months. Covered a lot of interesting topics, a lot of ground. And we did record the entire event. So we will be at some point releasing the video. If you attended the conference, you will get access to that video for free. If you didn't attend the conference but are interested in some of the panels and hearing some of the content, you will be able to get access to it for some nominal fee that we have yet to determine. But keep your eyes open in your email for that. We do have a event in December. We've always done twice a year. We'll do a event where we just have a networking event. We do one in the summer. We do one over the holidays. And our next networking event will be December the 6th in Long Beach. It'll be going up on our meetup page probably tomorrow. It is purely a networking event. So everything we were doing before I said to be quiet and sit down, we're just going to do that for 4 hours. And it's just a chance to meet people. We usually have over 300 RSVPs for that event. So it's a pure networking event. There's no education. And some of the events that I find most valuable, that's really where you can find people that you're looking to invest with. And last but not least, we don't do our meeting here in December just because we help to promote that annual event. So we're dark for December here in our group. We'll be up again in January. We don't have our content schedule up for next year, but we are working on a survey that we're going to be sending out. So you guys will all get it as part of our survey, and would love to hear from you what topics you find interesting, what things you think would be interesting to hear about. This year we did some great panels on short-term rentals. We did a panel on cannabis and real estate. We did a panel on actually, those two panels were actual input from someone in the audience who said, hey, you guys should do a panel on this. And we're like, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. So, when you get the survey, we'd appreciate if you take 5 minutes, let us know your thoughts, and then we'll be releasing the rest of the schedule, hopefully sometime in mid-December. Okay, so for tonight, our topic again is where to invest next, follow the money. And actually, this came from a panel we had in January of 2016. Carolyn works for a company called Cosmont and Companies, and Larry Cosmont, the guy who runs it, was a panel, and we were talking about as far as where to invest next. Everyone's looking for where that next hot spot is. Like, what's the next area that you want to invest in? And Larry's answer was, just follow the money. And I was like, God damn, that's so good. We should do a whole panel on that. And it's taken us 2 years to put it together, but here we are. So let's start off with, and Jason, I'm going to go to you first. Just give us a brief introduction on who you are and what you're currently involved in.
Sure. My name is Jason Muller. I'm pleased to be here. I'm traditionally trained as an architect. Went and did land use and entitlements for quite some time. Then I went and studied real estate development at USC. Worked for a large institutional investor, and did my own side investments. Scaled up from 3 units to 20 units to now we're building about 70 units and entitled close to 500 units in San Diego. And I'm locally based here in Manhattan Beach, and happy to be here.
Andrew.
How you doing? I'm Andrew Raitt with Verona Homes. We're an infill real estate development kind of boutique. We do the development side from acquiring the land through getting the entitlements and the permits, through the construction, and then through either the disposition of that and or just keeping it. And so we do both multifamily. We've been doing also a lot of these things called small lot subdivisions, and we're primarily focused just on the city of Los Angeles. And we do projects from duplexes up to my biggest project right now is a 45-unit apartment in Hollywood.
Perfect, thank you. Carolyn.
All right. My name is, let's see here. It was going green before, and now it's only red. Yellow? How's this work? Yeah, I think it died in my hands.
You could probably speak.
Okay, we'll do this. Okay, so Carolyn Petty. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Cosmont Companies. I've been in finance and operations for 25 years. I was an elected official in the city of Hermosa Beach, elected in 2013, served as mayor for a year, ended up going to work for Cosmont Companies about a year ago. And one of the things that I focus on is opportunity zones, and that is a new product created as a result of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Huge real estate opportunity for people interested in real estate, and I think that'll probably be one of the things that we talk about today.
Who here is heard about the opportunity zone? Raise your hand. All right. It's no longer a secret anymore. So, yeah. Go ahead, Sergio.
Perfect. My name is Sergio Ramirez. I'm the Deputy Director of Economic Development for the City of Long Beach. Relatively new to the City of Long Beach. I've been there about just under 2 years. Previously oversaw economic development for the City of Anaheim in Orange County. My job is actually to do sales pitches. I know that the whole premise of the group is not to do sales pitches, but essentially our department, our department here in Long Beach is relatively new. The city of Long Beach has been going through an incredible renaissance, and for a long time the city had a bad reputation. Not only not as a very kind of safe city, but also not as a very business-friendly city. Where to do projects, maybe some of you did projects there. To get projects approved through the entitlement process took a long time. So our department was created, and really what we are, essentially what I tell people, we're the WD-40 to help developers, investors such as yourself, get through the entitlement process so that you can, get a successful project and hopefully do some more. So looking forward to speaking to you about what's happening in Long Beach and connecting with each and every one of you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys all for being here. Is this on? Yeah, this sounds good. All right, so my name is David Coe. Again, I run, this is my office here at Keller Williams. I am my daytime job is as a residential realtor, and my hobby is real estate investing, although sometimes my hobby takes more time than my day job does. I'm currently actually a partner with Andrew in one of his small lot projects. I'm also run a small note fund, as well as a syndicated investor investing in multiple passive opportunities. So our specialty is distressed property. So if you ever see or know of a distressed property, and sometimes distress can be the property, sometimes it can be the owner, it's usually both. That's what we specialize in. So we're going to go ahead and start off tonight. And the first question, again, the topic is all about follow the money. I'm kind of curious what that means to each of you. So Jason, when I say follow the money, what does that mean to you?
It just means where the smart money goes. I mean, you're looking at what cities are emerging. What city, like Mar Vista is the perfect example. It's next to Venice and Culver City. There's a lot of old stock. That's one example of it. Another example is, there's a lot of conversation about cannabis, investing. It's not my thing, but that's interesting. Study it, understand it. There's a lot of if you talk about political, there's a lot of TOC zones, transit oriented zones. There's opportunity zones. There's a lot of political stuff like the ADU ordinance that had came up, and so there's also opportunity in that. And so those are the first three items that come up to my mind when I think about that.
Andrew, what about you?
That question would have been a really tough question back in like 2012, right?
And follow the bankruptcies.
Yeah, it's like, and why would you even mess around with development when you can do fix and flip, right? And people thought I was crazy when I just made that transition, and those projects take way too long. Well, it's given some great rewards. So the way I've kind of looked at it is what's really happening with the money, like where are these projects coming up, where are they being announced? What you find so often is these larger funds, they actually want to get investors excited, they want to get people that are involved with the city excited, and they create press releases even before they probably even own the land. Sometimes they have options, they have deal structures put together to be able to do the project, and you start to see them coming up like these blips, like here you have a project here and there. So I built my business sort of around drafting, right? And also a little bit of prodding here and there and figuring out what's going on. So a good example was in Boyle Heights, City Terrace, Lincoln Heights, El Sereno, Glasso Park, Cypress Park. I had done projects all in these different little areas, and then just by doing them, you kind of figure out, like, I expected to get rent for $2,000 and I got $2,800. Whoa, what's going on here? So you kind of see that you just by getting out there and doing it. But I literally just drafted off what was happening in downtown. Just drafted off all the money that was going in downtown. There's a lot of money going into Hollywood, right? There's a lot of money into Culver City. If I was looking for some new projects, I would do that. I would Mar Vista, right? Because all this money being poured into Culver City. I mean, the optimism, even in the arts district, right? And the arts district is great because so much money's going there. And by the way, the arts district in downtown LA is in an opportunity zone. It's like, whoa, this place is already hot. But there's places that are outside of that, right? Arts district means it can grow a little bit further, right? And then, so in downtown is still a great place, and money's being poured into it. And then there's all these new zones that are being changed as well that people don't know about yet. They're supposed to, land value is supposed to go up overnight. People discuss that, but there's still a lot of landowners that just operate their business. So that's how I've done it.
Cal, what about you? What do you see as, when I say follow the money, what does that mean to you, and especially with your business currently?
I would say there's no question it's opportunity zones. So let me just give let's say 60-second summary of why opportunity zones are so significant. It is a tax incentive opportunity, basically. So over 8,000 census tracts were nominated to be an opportunity zone across the country, and they have to be a low-income census tract, basically. So areas that are socioeconomically disadvantaged. So what happens is a fund forms, okay? A fund forms and makes an investment in one of those census tracts. The fund can only be capitalized with capital gains. Okay, so somebody can't just say, oh, I have some money, I want to invest in an opportunity fund. So somebody has to make a sale, and it could be a real estate sale, and then invest that through an opportunity fund that then invests in a city. And it could be real estate or it could be a business, but this is a real estate crowd, so I'm going to say it's really going to be, for you guys, a real estate discussion. The reason it's so significant is there's 3 tax advantages, and it's pretty stunning. So let's say somebody has $1 million they invest with an opportunity fund, and a fund has to meet certain compliance mandates. After 5 years of holding on to that investment, you have a permanent, forever relief on 10% of that $1 million. $100,000, you will never pay taxes on that. Okay. Oh, the first part, forgot to mention, deferral of income taxes, federal income taxes on that $1 million until December 31st of 2026. So the first thing is you defer taxes that you would have owed to the federal government of that capital gains. So deferral, step up in basis after 5 years, $100,000 permanently forgiven. 2 years after that, 7 years in, you get another 5% step up in basis. So now $150,000 you do not have to pay taxes on. But really, the pot of gold at the end of all of this is after 10 years, all of the appreciation associated with that investment is tax-free. I mean, when is the last time anybody has ever heard of anything like that? It is such a big deal. So this came out in January because it was part of the tax cut. But really it wasn't until October 19th when more regulations came out that it became refined enough where opportunity funds are starting to form. And now they are forming.
Have you seen any estimates on how much money is going to be poured into these opportunity funds?
That's a good question. So what really started all this was the estimation that there was over $6 trillion in this country of unrealized capital gains. People are sitting on it, and they don't want to trigger it because they don't want to pay taxes. So that's a pretty big deal. In the state of California, there is so much opportunity here, and so we can talk about it more. But from my perspective, that is where big money is going. It's a matter of how much of it's going to come to the state of California.
How can people find where opportunity zones are here or anywhere?
Great question. So if you go to DOF, so just Department of Finance, State of California, you Google it, you'll see them all. It's a great map, by the way. So you could see everything that's in the state of California, really easy. You could even type in an address, see if it's in an opportunity zone. And then some cities, such as Long Beach, have been really proactive, and Sergio will talk about it more, but putting on their website, this is what we have, this is what the projects are in those zones.
That's great. Sergio, what about you? I mean, especially in your job, right? You guys have been courting money for years now. What does that mean to you, follow the money?
I think for me, of course, it's follow the money to Long Beach, but it's really, I think what's happened in Long Beach is all the stars have aligned. I think in 2012, the city really made a decision, and actually a little bit before that, to really change its direction of where the city was headed. New leadership. We have the youngest mayor, Hispanic mayor, Mayor Robert Garcia, that's really kind of charging and really creating a very business-friendly and just kind of an overall very healthy environment in Long Beach. Also in 2012, we lost redevelopment agencies in the state of California, and so the city of Long Beach, which was one of the largest property owners going through redevelopment properties, had to kind of put properties out in the market. So I think what's happened is, and also I think the biggest factor was that as in the last economic upturn, Long Beach was actually passed up by investors, and I think investors really focused in Los Angeles and Orange County, and I think it kind of was forgotten. And I think in this now upturn, with leadership, the dissolution of redevelopment and having those properties go into play, and I think also the city being actually a leader in investment. Well, the city is actually about to open in June of 2019 a new civic center. It's the largest public-private partnership in the nation, which is a new city hall, a new library, 5 residential sites, a hotel, and a port.
Can you talk about what a private-public partnership is? Just a high-level overview on that.
A public-private partnership is a deal where the city and the private sector negotiate and come to an agreement on whether it's multifamily for housing development, or in this case, which was a new civic center, where the city is actually going to be the tenant to a developer, and then the property after a 40-year term actually reverts back to the city. And it was a way to have a developer actually take the risk, and but with the tenant in tow, essentially, and the city was able to get a new city hall through this method. So with all those things aligned, we have currently about $4 billion of private investment taking shape just in the downtown alone. We have other larger investments happening in the east end of our city. For Second PCH is a new big shopping center, kind of similar to the Point, that is under construction. We have projects in North Long Beach that are all taking shape, and really a lot of new development taking shape throughout the city. But there's endless, limitless opportunities that we still see. Long Beach is still, I think, for many of you who are in the multifamily and the commercial realm, it's still a place where numbers pencil and projects pencil. So we want you guys to come to Long Beach.
I think, obviously this is going to be a very Southern California focused discussion tonight, but I think it's important, like if you look at this panel, right, you've got two developers, you've got someone who works as a private consultant, you've got someone who works for a city. Just before, I know we were talking to people that were invested potentially in Arizona, potentially Tennessee. As you're looking, even if it's not here in Southern California, I think the things that you're going to hear tonight are the things that you want to go ask questions about when you're doing due diligence on a potential market or a state. So please take all of this as again, it'll be very Southern California focused, but hopefully what you'll glean out of this, even if this isn't where you want to invest, are the things that you want to be looking for as you expand your portfolio. The next question, and actually, Sergio, I'm going to talk to you directly about this. You kind of just mentioned some of this. I mean, you mentioned $6 billion. Talk about how the city of Long Beach views that money and what kind of effect it's going to have on the residential neighborhoods around some of these big commercial developments.
I think for us, there can be arguments whether, investment development is good or bad and kind of what happens in communities. For us, I think for in my job, in the shoes I wear, I see investment as a great thing. I think investment I've in my history in my experience, I've been responsible for neighborhood revitalization, kind of going in and really taking really problem communities and really turning them around. And for me, it's whenever you have new investment that goes in, it's like a bomb that has kind of shockwaves that creates, number one, other investors, developers. They like to invest in packs, and where they see somebody take a risk, kind of be on the shoulder of giants. When they see a larger developer that has analyzed a project and says, "Hey, there's something interesting here," they take risk. And then also property owners, people that maybe haven't painted their houses or haven't put in a new sign on a commercial business, they say, "Hey, you know what? The area's turning around. I'm actually going to invest instead of kind of taking my money and investing it elsewhere. I'm going to invest here." So for us, we see investment as kind of a positive thing. I think there's always arguments for gentrification, kind of what happens, but I think in smart cities like in Long Beach and in Anaheim, where I came from, the cities are actively building affordable housing, and I think what happens is as kind of areas turn around and you have nodes, kind of like what's happening in downtown Long Beach, where rents are increasing. The spillover effect is that folks are moving to other areas, and other areas of the city are improving. But what's happening is we're actually driving out blight. Problem properties, absentee property owners that are not really there engaged are getting proposals from folks that are engaged that want to remodel and actually clean up properties. And for the most part, when you talk to communities and tell them, "Hey, this is what's happening," and they kind of weigh, they're the ones living there. They know that rents are going to increase, but also education, services, commercial businesses is going to happen, and that's I think just a plus.
Carolyn, for you, I mean, you are an elected official here, and you deal with elected officials all the time. Like, what's in that position, how did you guys view development? Did you see it as something that was positive, or did you guys see it as something that was negative, or was it a little of both that you had to manage?
One thing I saw was the power a community can yield when they don't want something to happen. So there has to be that position, that element of trust between that developer and the community. There has to be that element of transparency. It's hard enough to get a project off the ground. The last thing you need is a community against you. And we could see it around here. There's been a lot of controversy in Redondo Beach. In Hermosa, we had some of our own challenges where we had a hotel developer come in, bring in his concept that the entire community hated, and he actually listened and changed his development to meet what the community wanted. And so I think that he's gone on a good path. But as a contrast, in another community, he showed his project to the community, and they hated it. And they drove him to the point where now there's litigation. And so I think that whereas a developer might come in with their perspective of what they want, and it might meet their financial needs, in the long run, if you don't have the community on board, it's going to probably cost you more than it would have. So I really see that community aspect being a really important part of the equation.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I may add to that, I think that's a huge kind of point. I think, as investors, if you're thinking, "Hey, I'm going to go in and do a project that just makes sense, financially, and I'm not going to pay attention to the architecture, landscape, or even listen to the community," I think plop art development doesn't work. I mean, you're going to have communities the community is going to come out and push you. The city planners are going to push against projects. But if you actually do due diligence, kind of meet with the stakeholders, understand, kind of sit, walk. I always tell investors and developers, go jog around a site, go visit the property day, night, and just kind of feel and make sure you feel. Well, the biggest developers that we've seen have success are the ones that are out there having coffee with stakeholders, really listening, and really then taking, instead of designing a project before, listening and observing and feeling in an environment, and then charging their architects to actually then design or kind of modify a project.
Andrew, I know that's a meeting with the community for both you guys. I know is a big part of it. Talk about some of the things that you do when you're trying to get a project off the ground. How do you try to interact and prevent having some kind of negative reaction from the community?
I think, first of all, I'm a little bit jaded, so if you do enough developments, you start to there's the good, the bad, and the ugly. I 100% agree with you, Sergio. That's my mantra, is to really understand what the community is, what your project's going to do to enhance the community, not just aesthetically, but there's other features that it can have. The challenge is really understanding who the stakeholders are. Because you may have a group, and let's say Rick's in charge of the group and everybody looks up to Rick, and then all of a sudden Joe shows up, a few months after, and Joe's really loud, and Joe just gets really louder and louder, and he uses Facebook, and he's really good at it. And all of a sudden he has a lawyer, and he goes, I don't care what you're going to do, Andrew, because I'm going to sue you. I'm going to use California environmental quality law because I hate what you're doing. I don't care what the project is. We don't need more development. And that's what's happening in Los Angeles. It's almost you can't do anything correctly, and it's a challenge. So if Long Beach doesn't have that aspect going on, that's great. So, I can talk later on about what to mitigate, but the steps that I take is you get involved with the neighborhood council. It's really important. You also talk to your neighbors. You get to know them at nighttime, on the weekends. One of the best things to do is kind of hang out and wait for them to get their cars, they start pulling in their cars. And it's even just running up and say, hey, I want to talk to you. I know it might not be a good time. And also speak their language. Have somebody with you who can speak their language. That's important. So they can feel like, hey, this person really is reaching out. And then begin to take those steps. Sometimes you can get somebody who's on the who represents a neighborhood council at the city level. They're not on the neighborhood council. They represent like the mayor's office or the actual council district's office, and getting them and letting them understand. There's usually somebody called a planning deputy that's related to that, and letting them know what's going on. Typically, they just want to hear what's going on, what's happening, because they get all the angry emails and phone calls, right? And then even somehow, some way, get in front of the mayors. And the other thing is, if you can, or some of your consultants can, contribute like in a meaningful way, not to try to buy people, but like people get elected for reasons and they need money for their campaigns, right? And knowing that you provided support and you're looking, you care about their district and what's happening, because the money they get is not just frivolously used. They use it for actually donating to other causes, in the community. So, and yeah, it's a fine line. You have to balance that's there. And then you start to understand what the stakeholders are looking at, and then sitting down and having those basically living room conversations with the dog jumping on your lap. And then just keep getting beat up and beat up and beat up until the point where this person's not that bad. And that's usually what ends up happening. And you always want to go in with a huge giant project, because you're going to have to dwindle that way back. And you have a lot of experience with that.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear some of your strategies on, I know that is part of it, right, is knowing that you're going to have some opposition on the size of the project. How do you, when you're having that conversation, how do you start it off? What's your methodology for, dealing with a community like that?
There's a lot of different methods. I'm sure there's a lot of different good ways to do it and bad ways. One way that I've found success is understanding the base zoning, understand the urban fabric, understand the local. What's the local? What's going on? And what I mean by that is, for instance, all not everybody has studied urban planning, right? Not everybody has studied architecture. Not everybody has studied these items. And so all the elected officials are being voted in to represent, their districts. And so there's always different one's a businessman, one's an urban planner, one will be, so there's always supposed to be a good mix to represent and vet against these projects. And so what I like to do is, by the way, everybody has the right to enjoy their property. So if you buy a single-family home lot, you're allowed to build a single-family home lot. It's about how it's designed, what's the aesthetic. And so my first step is always to meet with the planning director. What's his vision? What does he think is the highest and best use? Get his feel, get his take, get his recommendations, and do a couple sessions with him, 1, 2, 3, 4, before you even go hard, or it's time well invested, right? Second piece is talk to the neighbors, talk to, happens to be a couple of elderly people having coffee there. Talk to them about why they like this space. What do they love about this area? And then, once you get further down the line, you do have a police fundraiser or a fire fundraiser, right? But then also you have a community meeting, and you literally have tables set up and this is the kind of architecture that we've been getting feedback from the planning director. He thinks that contemporary architecture is no good. He's recommending plantation style because it fits within the urban fabric. That's why I said that word earlier. And don't try to go against the grain. You have to kind of go with how you feel, if you're playing music with a band, you're not going to play something that's off key and off rhythm, right? You're going to actually jam with the band. So it's kind of like you're jamming with the music, you're jamming with the city, you're jamming with the people. And so that's an analogy for those musicians out there. But I think that what it comes down to is listening, right? You have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And so I think that the community outreach process before you actually go in front of Planning Commission is the most important investment you can make. As long as you're listening to people and taking those. The worst thing in the world is to get good advice and not act on it, right? So why wouldn't you ask for advice from all the wisest people in the community? Not all. You got to know who to vet and who knows urban planning, who doesn't. But hey, everybody has a voice, and so that's kind of the step, the process. And I don't want to get too technical because it's more overview, but a lot of the time cities have great general plan and they have a certified EIR. A lot of the time there's weaknesses in your EIR, so environmental impact report per CEQA, so it's California Environmental Quality Act. You always want to have peer reviews of that for local professionals that know the area. So if there was a geologist that was studying the geology that's from Santa Cruz, he's not quite local, right? You want to get the local geologist from UCLA that actually lives in El Segundo. That's all he does. So you can peer review, and so that mitigates risk, and I think it creates good faith. So that's it.
You mentioned CEQA, because I think that's a big part of what you guys deal with. Andrew, I'm going to ask you to kind of talk about this one. Can you explain what CEQA means and the impact that it has on your kind of day-to-day life?
So the California Environmental Quality Act was really established to prevent people from doing things that are going to be really harmful to the environment. And there's thresholds in regards to the significance of an impact, or if there is even. The first kind of level is projects that are something called categorically exempt, meaning that they're not considered to have an impact, like building a new house, a smaller, apartment project, right? And then over the years, that threshold in the eyes of the community has sort of gone down and down and down, meaning that smaller projects are becoming more significant. Then there's also this aspect of, even though they're not significant projects, categorically exempt, if you're doing a bunch of them, they look at it like there's an overall impact. I forgot the word, it just popped out of my head. And then the city, if they feel like there's going to be impact, you do something called an initial study. And sorry if I'm boring everybody, but the initial study says, here's my project, here's what I'm doing. And then the planners at the city will say, hey, you know what, we think that there's some impacts here. We want you to do a study, a deeper study, and we will basically identify what all the impacts are, and we're going to mitigate against it. We're going to take some steps that are going to mitigate against this, and that's called a mitigated negative dec, right? And there's also something called a negative declaration, which is a little bit different. And then there's the big one, which is a very expensive process, and it's called an environmental impact report. And you're studying every aspect of significance that could happen. And you better make sure you study every aspect, because if you don't study them, they're going to come and say, hey, you didn't study the geology, or you didn't study the air quality, right? And then usually, I mean, literally, when you print these things out, they're like this big. And they're they're very, very expensive. So some of the groups will sue. And this is the biggest, easiest way to sue somebody. You can appeal a project for less than $100 in the city of Los Angeles, and you can stall, $100 million project for months just with one person for less than $100, right? You can sue on different aspects. Doesn't mean you're going to necessarily win. So it could be very expensive. In a project that I heard of recently when I was going to an opportunity zone meeting, it was just a few hundred units in Berkeley. They've been in this project for, I think, more than 5 years. 58 public hearings. And that place needs housing bad, right? And they've got sued more than 8 times. Yeah, and there's an affordable component to it. So we wonder why prices are very expensive for rent. But this is the biggest reason. So hopefully our new governor will be able to create some other exemptions, right? And I kind of like to think of it like a box, like a master, kind of study that cities can make, where it's like, these projects are going to be exempted because of these studies that we've already put all this money into. But it's going to take a while before that happens, and hopefully there's some leadership there. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Actually, I'm going to give you this question too. Like, we just had a big election last week, right? And I think there were, first of all, Prop 10 did not pass. In a room full of investors, there's applause. I like it. And which I think the general feeling, because we've been talking about this as a FIBI group for a while, that the issue with California housing isn't the fact that, there's this uncontrollable greed by developers to raise the rent. It's that we have this lack of supply. And one of the things that Gavin Newsom, as governor, like his first thing he talked about was addressing the affordable housing as his number one priority. And Sergio, this question's kind of for you. What does he need to do? Clearly you guys as a community have done some things, I think, to encourage investment. And I know some of that investment is creating housing. What are some of the things that you think you guys have done well as a city that could be implemented on a state level?
Definitely. First, I gotta tell Andrew that whole explanation for CEQA, that was awesome, because I think it's such a complex component for us. I think it's true. We unfortunately, I think CEQA. The purpose of FIBI is actually in the right place to actually protect the environment, but I think what's happened is folks who want to block development have utilized it to kind of stall development, and it's unfortunate. I think for us in Long Beach, what we've done, one of the things actually that I think would be very beneficial as something that I think other cities that could do is we've actually adopted specific plans for certain areas that we want to see kind of development happen. In our downtown, we adopted a specific plan called PD 30. And that plan development, what the city did when we adopted the plan, we actually looked at what the general plan for what the general plan density calls for that area, and we actually did an environmental impact report for that entire area based on maximum densities allowed per parcel. And so then what a developer, when a developer comes through, all they have to do is kind of follow-up reports for CEQA that are only specialized or project-specific. So if they're doing like a mixed-use project, depending on features of the project, they, instead of going through a 2 to 3 year process, they're now looking at 6 to 9 months. And so for us right now, I think I read in Real Deal magazine, we're one of the hottest apartment markets in the country. We have about 25,000 units under construction, and when we have about another 3,000 that are in the pipeline. So those are projects that have been approved, just waiting for financing to be built. So we have definitely a boom. So I think that same model of being able to work with a community to entitle us, planned development areas, it would actually help facilitate development.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So when I was at an institutional development company, we worked a lot with Long Beach, and it was a really great atmosphere to do investments, and we're able to entitle 150 units on Broadway and Magnolia, as well as Third Pacific. That's a kind of ongoing thing. And so one of the things is, somebody's challenged the CEQA. It's almost like Show Enough, like you guys ever watched, The Last Dragon, I think it was called, or what he did is he's going up to developers straight up and saying, hey, I'm going to challenge you to the very end if you don't give me 1% of the project valuation, straight up extortion, right? And so we go, well, we've done peer review on every single of the CEQA documentation. We're going to take you to the mat. And we showed him 1,000-page peer review on each one, and he passed. And he went on to the next.
Yeah, he was an attorney, actually.
Yeah.
He was a CEQA attorney.
Yeah, I don't want to name any names.
People, and eventually what ended up happening, we started having larger, very well-capitalized firms like Saris Regis, second PCH is being done by CenterCal.
Yeah,
and what they essentially said is like, hey, please sue us because our attorneys are so expensive that we're going to come after you for damages, and we're going to draw. You're going to try to stall us, but then we're going to draw out litigation, and you're going to pay us back. And he's gone away. So yeah. I think I think just like in other communities, those folks are going to other communities, and I think hopefully what Gavin Newsom can do is look at kind of what are the loopholes with CEQA and be able to kind of fix those problems, and I think that'll help the housing crisis.
Carol, with some of the stuff that you guys are doing at Cosmont, the project you guys are involved in, you guys see all different kinds of government involvement and government sometimes resistance at both a local, a city, a state level. What are some of the things that you think that the governor should be looking at maybe to help and spur the creation of affordable housing?
Well, he actually mentioned two things. He mentioned enhanced infrastructure financing districts. So it's a tax increment financing district. Are people familiar with how that works? Okay, maybe not. So the way it works is this. Let's say there is actually a good example of this is in Redondo Beach, where we're working with them in creating an EIFD, an Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District. So right now there's a power plant there. And it's basically looks like it's been sold. And there's going to be a mix of uses there. And one of those mixes of uses is going to be a park, which benefits the community. But in order to pay for that, there's also going to have to be some element of housing associated with it. And so if you think about it right now, what infrastructure is there that supports housing? It's a power plant. There is no infrastructure there. So who's going to pay for that? Well, if the developer had to pay for it, the project probably will never pencil out. So the city actually comes to the table and pays for that infrastructure as part of that financing district. And what they do is they pay for that infrastructure because they bond against future property taxes that are going to be coming to the city. And so with the dissolution of redevelopment that Sergio was talking about in 2012, the state really didn't have many tools in its toolkit. And so the last few years, a few housing bills have come through to incentivize housing. One of the problems is whenever the legislature comes up with bills, there's always so much attached to it that kind of makes it unviable. And so prevailing wage and all of these things that a developer must comply with. And so the state has this idea, but the state can't get out of its own way. And so there aren't actually that many developers who want to take advantage of any of this. So the hope is because Gavin Newsom has made it really clear, and this is what he's saying, he is a big believer in EIFDs. And by the way, the County of Los Angeles doesn't want to participate with EIFDs. So again, that's another problem. They don't want to participate because they don't want to give up any of the tax increment. Even right now, if the project never happens, there's no tax increment that you're actually giving away. But they don't want to give away the concept that they might have that tax increment in the future. So EIFDs are big and opportunity zones are big. And one of the reasons is, it seems like he's pretty savvy and he understands the importance of attracting private capital to your state. And so, but the problem with opportunity zones and the state of California is state income tax. So nearly every state in the country, with the exception of a handful, has aligned their state tax code with the federal tax code, which is basically they're not going to tax. But the state of California hasn't agreed to do that. And so that's going to be a problem. Top tax income rate in California is, I think, 13.1% or 13.8%. And so when these opportunity funds are out there looking, there's 8,000 options for them, or many options within those 8,000 census tracts. They're going to look at the tax consequences and say, we can just go to Florida. I mean, why would we come to California? So there's going to have to be something that happens at the state level. And so there are a lot of people advocating for the state to do something like this. If there is a project that is in the best interests of the state of California, it aligns with the state interest, so it's housing, figure out a way to give them some CEQA streamlining. Figure out a way that there's going to be some kind of tax relief. So the state has a goal that's to increase the housing supply, actually do something about it. So that's what we're hearing.
So we've been talking a lot about it really on the entitlement phase. I'm curious to hear from you guys that are actively building things. Like, what about some of the things on that process of getting, not just getting permits approved, but getting something built? Are there things that you'd like to see, laws you'd like to see enacted, and Andrew, I'll ask you this first, that would maybe help to streamline the actual building process?
That's a really tough question because there's like 1,000 aspects to talk about that at every single, because we have Public Works, we have the Department of Building and Safety, we have, the city planning. I mean, there's layers and layers of not just fees, but just different departments to go through. But I think overall, if there was a way for us to be able to create something streamlined that says, as a state, we really want this, and as a city, we really want this. I think a big one that everybody's really kind of talking about and putting kind of the policies in place is to creating infrastructure and density around transportation zones. That's like a really big push, and there's a lot of incentives that are out there. One of the ones, if in the city of Los Angeles, it's called transportation-oriented communities. If you're in that area and you provide affordable housing, that doesn't mean your whole project has to be affordable. It just means a component. So I'll give you an example. If you have to do, by right, you can build 100 units, and you're in a specific area that's really close to like a number of features related to transportation, you might even, in the city of LA, be able to get up to 180 units on that property. And they're going to want you to be able to provide between 11% to 8%, up to 25%, depending on what income levels on the low income units you have to provide. I mean, that's a fractional amount compared to how much density you get. But there's all these little goodies too. You can get extra height, right? You can get reduced setbacks. You can actually meld zones, which would typically take a variance. And it's really hard for the people in the community to really fight that. And one of the reasons why is because the public benefit at the end of the day for affordable housing is so much greater than what some of the consequences that they're fighting for, like they don't like, whether it's transportation or air quality, etc. So that's like right now a path that we have in the city of Los Angeles that's very clear, and we can get it helps with the project economics. And by the way, we can reduce the parking. Whether that causes a problem with us to rent the units or not, that's another story. But it's being encouraged, and you're very familiar with the transportation-oriented districts throughout the state of California. That's what the city of LA is doing.
Jason, what about you? What do you see as maybe some things on a state level or even on a local level that we can be doing to help, encourage affordable housing construction?
I think I'll try to answer that in two parts. One part is just a statistic that I found shocking is 30% of a project is all city fees, right? So if you were to build a unit and you're trying to sell it for $1 million, you could have sold that unit for $700,000, which therefore would make it a little more affordable to the younger families, right? So you really got to start to think, where is that school fee or developer fee actually going? One time, I got the nerve to ask, I was building a 186-room Hyatt Place hotel in Pasadena. I was like, so I'm paying you $200,000 for an art fee. Where is that actually going? And she's like, oh, we have a party at the end of the year. Like, she literally said, I'm having a party at the end of the year. And I thought it was going to be, because usually in hotels you can use the public domain and put public art. Like, and which is quite nice, you know. I'm an advocate of public art, so that's why I asked the question. But I was like, wow. So, like, I have 2 young children, a 3-year-old and a 10-month-old, and so my hearts go out to being able to improve schools and to use these fees properly. But it's like, who is managing these fees? Who is regulating these fees? And who's cross-checking and auditing these fees? I don't know. I'm not. But it kind of makes me think, 30%, that's a lot of money, right? Number 2 is, if you have zoning, right, and you have a straight path forward, it should be more streamlined. And I know that there's, I got a trivial question. Who knows how long it took the Empire State Building to be built? Anybody?
The new one?
No.
A year? It's like 3 years.
Pretty close. 13 and a half months, right? This was before email. This is before, like, you know, modern times. And so if you think about it, we're relating permit process and entitlement process from the same process 5, 10, 15 years ago before email. Like, there is no reason why a municipality should be able to transfer data and do group checks and do their productivity similar to a private and public sector than we do. So it just makes you think, because we're all paying tax dollars. Like, we're paying tax. We're paying their salary. So it's like, who's regulating these systems, you know? And I have had a great experience so far with working with Redondo and Hermosa Beach so far. But in Los Angeles, like, you really, like, he sits right next to you. You can't just, like, go and ask him, you know? You guys don't talk to each other. You have email now. You can just email him. It's just quite fascinating, the disconnect. And I feel like if we had a peer review group come and audit the LADBS or Los Angeles Building and Safety, it would be interesting to see the results. It would be interesting to see the results of the auditing of the fees and how that's allocated. It would be interesting to see if you did a survey on customer service, what those results would be. That's it.
Maybe if I can kind of also provide some recommendation. I think Andrew's point of kind of going against the grain and kind of, unfortunately, I think there's abuses in everything. In the private sector, public sector, there's going to be those bad apples. The one recommendation that I can give kind of you as developers, as investors, is it's very hard with larger cities. In Long Beach and Anaheim, we actually offer this. And one of the things that you should do in smaller cities is that when you actually kick off a project, instead of kind of meeting with the planning department, building and safety, public works, fire, all separately, you ask for a kind of, especially if your project's a little bit larger, if you're doing anything kind of more than 10, 15 units, you actually ask for a kickoff meeting where you have everybody kind of all hands meeting, where you have your design team come and essentially explain what you're going to do. And that actually provides you a couple things. One, you actually have the city team right there talk to each other and say, well, that works, as far as like, hey, the backup for fire or trash pickup, that works. Or somebody says, hey, that doesn't work, and your design team is able to make the changes before you actually formally submit. The other thing is that it actually allows you to build a kind of relationship with the folks that actually attend those meetings, so that when you're actually going to the counter to resubmit, instead of kind of dealing with kind of that young planner or engineer that just graduated college, you're able to kind of have the relationship where say, hey, that person that was at that meeting, I'm going to follow up with an email just to make sure that your product is moving forward. You have to be responsible for moving your product forward and not really rely on staff to kind of get back to you. And I mean, unfortunately, the realities are the realities. But I think the more that you can develop relationships with those folks, and just kind of when they provide you, and take good notes in your meetings, and be able to say, hey, on this meeting I was told this. Today I'm getting corrections that kind of are opposite to that, and being able not to be afraid to kind of raise that to the director of planning, director of engineering, and be able to say, hey, I'm getting kind of cross information. I need some help.
It's good feedback. Yeah.
So. Andrew, I'll give you this one first. So clearly I think follow the money, part of that is following the politics, right? Like, it seems to be that money will flow where there's government agencies either creating programs, that are allowing for some kind of development. But even through that, finding land these days is really hard. So Talk about some of the strategies when you're looking for a property to either, to develop or to fix up. What are some of the strategies that you're using to actually find projects that are, economically feasible to work on these days?
That's a really great question. In fact, being here tonight is actually one of those. Going out and going to other groups that are out there. I was having a conversation with a really nice gentleman that I've seen many times, and we were chatting, and he said, hey, I think there's this land deal, and what's interesting, it looked a little cheaper when he showed it to me than I had been sent an email on it from somebody else, right? And I was like, wow, that's interesting. I'll look into it. But that's just got to be one component overall. You're noticing that there's a lot of projects that are out there, and you have a lot of visibility of this too, Jason, on people that have really had an expectation on costs, and costs have risen considerably, and general contractors really have to underwrite things very carefully, and their costs have gone up, and their buffers have gone up, and so some of these projects just don't make sense financially, and those might be opportunities for you. Doesn't mean you have to build that exact thing that's approved. There's some nuances and some changes to it. And also your lens on how you look at that project. Maybe you can put more density, something else that's on it. And then finding out, the best way is always coming down to just that door knocking. I know it's kind of I don't want to do that. I don't want to get out there. But the truth is when you start talking to neighbors or area you want to be in, you'll find out who's sending the mailers. Those people are nice to talk to. They're people who are doing wholesale, right? A lot of the folks that actually are sending mailers and showing how many deals that they bought, they're not developing that project. They bought too many projects. They can't build all those, right? But guess what? They'll turn around and call another builder to do them. And you may be able to call them right on the right day. And they may have talked to somebody minutes before and go, hey, I got this deal. Great. I'll send it right over before they send it to one of their best clients just because they're in the moment, right? So those aspects that are out there. And then calling on pending deals I'm sorry, the MLS is still damn good to use, guys. It really is. It's powerful. LoopNet, it's powerful. You can find those projects that are sitting there saying pending. Next thing you know, someone's playing games. They're asking for a price reduction. They're asking for an extension, right? And you might be able to just come in. Sometimes it takes 2, 3, or 4 buyers to get some of these great commercial projects, right? And you just come in and you just happen to be the right fit. You have a track record or you're partnering with someone with a track record, and all of a sudden you can put this deal together. Before we started this, Jason and I were talking, and I thought it was really unique what he was telling me. He goes, we're doing a lot of projects that is creative financing, working with landowners to be able to create structures that make sense for them, and it really makes sense for us. And I was like, that's awesome. That's a great way to be able to create a deal that wasn't there before.
What does that mean? So what types of things are you guys doing?
So I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes to construction. Construction costs, at least from my perspective, have gone up about 10% for the last 2 years. That's arguable. It could be up or high, but at least from my data. I save all my data, so I'm just crossing against my projects. And land bases have gone up tremendously. So deals don't make sense right now unless there's a creative acquisition strategy, right? And so what that means to me is that there is a JV land component to it, right? There's a seller carry component, or there's an interesting escrow period component to it, right? And so what we've been able to do is we'll use something similar to MLS. It's called CoStar. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with it. But we go and we reach out to 100 apartment building owners, right? And we ask them, hey, would you like to do a JV land deal? Surprisingly enough, 1 out of 100 say yeah, right? And so we have them actually 1031 their units, their value into our LLC. We get land units, right? Then what happens at the very end, they get principal and profit in condos, right? They rent them out for 12 months, and then they 1031 out. So they get a profit of condo profit, and they also get protected on the front and the back. And what I mean by a JV land deal, which means the guy wants $10 million for his property. That's a little rich. I mean, everybody wants kind of a little bit, they're going to shoot for the stars, right? So I was like, what if I give you 5 in the front and 6 in the back? And he's like, how long will you do it? 24 months? I'm in, right? So it requires less equity up front. You can probably get a bank loan for a 60% loan to value on that. You can pay him out, take out probably $1 million of pre-dev dollars, get it entitled, build it, and then pay him off his profit, and he's happy, we're happy, right? And so another component of that is like, which cities are cities that are great for development? Long Beach, right? Long Beach has great property. If you don't know Long Beach specifically, there's some beautiful places out there. And we've looked at, creating structures similar to that. There's a lot of apartment stock in Long Beach. We're also building a lot in Hermosa Beach right now. There's a lot of places that are underdeveloped. You look at the hill section in Hermosa Beach, We're also building a lot in Redondo Beach. Like, if you ever drive down the street, and if you guys really think you love real estate, and you should have a map in your head of all the properties that you drive by all the time, all the old ones, and when a fence goes up, you should be like, oh man, I should have bought that property. Because I was thinking it would be better as a, a yogurt shop or whatever, you think the highest and best use are. And so you act on those. Like, you call the guy. You go there and knock on the door. Ask him. He's like, you know what? My kids, they all want to sell the property. The property's like probably way under rented. They haven't done TIs in like 10 years. And it's not the highest and best use. And so you go in there, you provide a creative acquisition strategy with them, you go with the planning director, you get community feedback, you got a great smoking hot deal to provide for investors.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah, go ahead, and then we'll go.
Okay. So something that's kind of like a little more within like the reach for people who are somewhat like newer or just want a little less risk. There's a lot of properties that have been sitting out there that are on the MLS that kind of start coming off. People just literally that. A lot of people think that, there's a lot of inventory. There's a lot of crap inventory. The good stuff's selling, guys. I mean, especially in Los Angeles. I can't talk about Redondo Beach. I'm only talking about the city of Los Angeles. But a lot of these properties that are coming off, right, there's a possibility of going to the landowner that's there and saying, hey, listen, I think I can get to your price, Joe. I think I can get you that $700,000. You're like, really? Talk to me. What's going on? And we don't need a broker. Or how about we do this? And all of a sudden, you could structure a deal with Joe and saying, how about this? I'll do like either a rent to own. I mean, there's all these podcasts on it. I mean, like, listen to them. There's really interesting some of the strategies folks have with like no money out of pocket, being able to structure things, because Joe, at the end of the day, he wants $700,000 no matter what. That's what Joe wants. Okay. But that doesn't mean that you can't build a house behind his house on the same property and rent that as well. Right. So there's a lot of creative approaches that you can take without having a whole lot of money. The thing it takes is a lot of work, a lot of sweat equity, right? And going out there and finding the people that can actually go and build it. So those opportunities do exist if you're a scrapper. And there's, I like the expired listing aspects because there's somebody that wants to do something and maybe you can find a way to make it work.
It's a great idea, except for the part about having no brokers.
I think the one value, because I've seen a lot of people make a lot of money over the last 20 years, and the one value that a lot of people oversee and are kind of afraid of is kind of working with City Hall. And I think as investors, kind of going up to your planning counter, or and actually talking to the planners and just finding out kind of, hey, what are some of the projects that are under construction? What are some of the projects that are in the pipeline? What is the city's vision? And they actually will lay out to tell you kind of where these investments are going to happen. And then from there, you can actually build circles of like properties that essentially are going to increase in value. So, that's a low-lying fruit, that just building relationships with City Hall and being able to go in there and talk to folks and just say, hey, what's going on? What's the plan? Sometimes it can be hard to get meetings with the planning director, but sometimes you'll have like an intern or a assistant planner that's at the counter, and they are bored out of their mind, and you have to time it. Sometimes, I've seen developers just sit in lobbies of City Hall waiting for like the crowd to die down, and then they just kind of approach the counter, and you'll be surprised what it takes. Just bringing donuts to a public counter, or coffee, and just those people sometimes they hear all day long, hey, we pay your taxes, I pay your job. So being nice to them and actually just saying, hey, what can you tell me? They will make you a lot of money. So
It's a great point because it's true. How far a smile will go, and once you get them on, like how much information you can get, because no one knows what's happening better in a city than the city itself. And Cal, I got a question for you, and it's more because we're talking about again following the money. I know we've been talking a lot about some of the struggles that people have, but I think when you do see a big project coming out, clearly someone has cleared all these hurdles. What are some of the ways that you follow? Like, what kind of things do you do to read or news media or thing to kind of follow along, like where development's coming from? Like, what's some of the websites or just different sources of information that you'll follow to understand where money's coming from?
You know what? I can look at Long Beach for a great example because we were talking about opportunity zones, and Long Beach already has on their website all the projects that are out there, right? Exactly. I mean, so a well-run city makes sure that people know because they're trying to attract capital to their community. So I think it really comes down to a sophisticated city or knowing the community. I mean, I can't emphasize enough the importance of knowing what's going on in that community. So when we were talking about projects that you guys have going on, if a planning commission is going to make a decision on a project and they have never seen that person before, they have no idea who that person is, that developer is that's coming before them for approval, it's going to be a little different lens than if they've seen that person. Let's say the city was undergoing a general plan. And that person was actually showing up to the meetings. They're showing interest in their community. They actually have an idea as to what's going on. There's going to be a different perspective when you come to them for your approval. And so I just can't emphasize enough that it's not just about, first of all, it's about knowing the players. And something that I think is valuable, too, is knowing the way that planning commission is and who those people are. So as an example, planning commission that I know that two people always kind of vote the same. The other two people always vote the same. One guy is trying to figure out and kind of know what's going on. It's really important to know the dynamics in that planning commission. And then, so I'll give another example. So somebody I know who wanted to get a historic preservation for their home. I told that person, I said, you need to go back to those old meetings and take a look at what they said when they were approving historic preservation for other properties. Get an idea of what their perspective is. Know who you're dealing with. You don't just walk in and say, well, this is what I have, so can't you just please approve me? You really need to do your research. And the other thing that I want to emphasize is that there is so much that happens behind the scenes that you will never know. So when a project comes for approval, you have no idea all of the discussions and kind of the positioning of what's going on. The best thing is to develop the relationships, and when you walk in the room, you have an idea as to where it's going to go.
Andrew, from your perspective, I mean, you're constantly trying to keep your eyes open. Like, what kind of news do you absorb? What type of information do you absorb to try to get a sense of, where development's happening and where are some areas that you may want to pursue as a smaller developer?
I think I could always get better. And one of the ways that I do it is sometimes just, like your advice was really good about going and finding some people that are willing to talk to you in the planning department. The city of LA right now is a great opportunity for the folks that are here to kind of where the ball's going, right? They have something called Recode LA, and they're going to take block by block in like areas and creating these updated zoning, right? And they're doing them segment at a time, and it can create great opportunities for people to go, wow, this lot that's here that's single family is actually going to be able to build, a 4-unit, or it's going to be zoned for an apartment complex. So those are kind of opportunities. So for me specifically, I look at, it's called the city's planning's website. It's on the right-hand side. It says what's new, and it's a bunch of draft ordinances, right? So how do you get ahead of that, right? And your advice was perfect. Like actually spending time at seeing what's happened, seeing an ordinance that have been there, talk to the person who's a planner, saying, hey, Matt, that was really cool. I read this. And do you have anything else that's coming? Oh, yeah, we have this thing. That's right. And then you start speaking their language and what they're doing. It's hard as hell to go to all those meetings, just to be honest with you. It's really hard. There are consultants that can help, that have a little bit aspects of being dialed into. But nothing is better than doing your own research, because all of a sudden you read through it, and then it starts opening up all these other doors for other things. You're like, oh, what about that? What about this? Like, I have to go, Carolyn, I have to go look at, understand what this infrastructure credits that you're talking about with the cities using their bonds. I mean, I need to learn that. Now I know I got to go down that rabbit hole, because there might be an opportunity, a deal comes by that could be a great, and I call Carolyn and say, hey, can we talk, you, me, and Larry, and maybe there's some kind of partnership with one of the cities that wants to do something. So it's hard. You got to start somewhere. Also, just getting familiar. There's like websites that are out there that kind of give you some good lay of the land, like The Real Deal. There's Urbanize LA. There's what's another? Sorry. Globe Street. Now I have to look at Globe Street, right? Now, not all of them are always 100% accurate. Sometimes they'll do articles on us that we don't even publish. Nobody called us. They just Curbed LA. Yeah, there's just all of a sudden an article shows up about us with our picture there, and we're like, what? It's like, wait, but you can start to get some information and seeing what's happening. But the devil's in the details with these planners, because some of these groups are using these little tricks and these little things, and you never know. And there's like a specific plan. Here's a fun one on Vermont Boulevard. Actually, on Virgil Boulevard. It's such a cool thing. Virgil Boulevard, the zoning says R2. So most everybody's going to say, oh, all you can build is 2 units, right? But guess what? There's a specific plan on there that upzones it because it wants to be in this thing called sub-area B that allows you to have R3. So you can build 1 unit per every 800 square feet. But guess what? It's also in the transportation-oriented communities. So you can increase it, and that most of that area is in a thing called Tier 3, 75% bonus density. On top of that, increased density. Oh, on top of that, it's in an opportunity zone right there, right? And it's really cool how you can just start to kind of uncover. And I know it seems exhausting, but when you start getting excited, you're like, oh my gosh, this cool little site I found, and it's a great deal. And now it keeps getting better and better and better.
Andrew, that sounds really confusing. So instead of going to LA, you got to come to Long Beach because it's a lot easier.
Bring it back.
I love it.
As a reminder, if anyone has questions, raise your hand. We'll get to some questions. Yeah, go ahead, Kyle.
So I know a lot of the projects you guys work on, and I'm sure a lot of the ones that you have eyes on are debt finance. When I think about following the money, a lot of that's kind of access to capital and debt financing. So I was wondering where you guys see the landscape for, lending in the near-term future here, and kind of how do you utilize that with these projects you're developing?
Yeah, great question. So the question, in case you didn't hear it, is about lending following the money. That's a big part of it. So, I mean, where are you guys looking at financing for some of your stuff? Where do you see, clearly rates have been rising here for the last year and a half. Where do you see financing? Can you still get good money for deals?
Yeah, for the most part, I think if you were to just do like apples to apples 2 years ago to now, right? Like you can get a construction loan for like 5.5% versus 7% now, right? Same like a townhome project or something, right? And so what I have been seeing is that when they're underwriting the acquisition loan and the development loan, their diligence is deeper. So they're actually diving deeper into each aspect of the project, and they're vetting it, and they're being more conservative. But I haven't seen a slowdown in term sheets. Like usually we go 2-3 deep. When we get our acquisition and development. So I would say right now for construction it's about 7%. That's kind of market-ish. That's with guarantee with bad boy carve outs. Just kind of like that's the premium loan if you have a good balance sheet. But I do want to kind of revert back to your original question on how we get the data. I think one thing that we forgot to mention that I think is very important, and not to backtrack, but keeping true to your broker network is so important. And it's crazy that if you treat your brokers well, they will bring deals off market to you. And you'll be surprised. They're the ones with their finger on the pulse. They know what's going on. They know, like, the planning director well. They know, like, they live in the city. So I would say that making sure that you keep your investor or your broker's communication open, taking them lunch, pick up the phone, figure it out, right? And the two is, I like to look at CoStar and MLS and for the data, right? So if I go and I just look at a market and just comb through, and I see a bunch of apartment buildings, old apartment buildings that are for like $5 million, then I have new apartment buildings that have been renovated and are on the market for $10 million, there's something there, right? So if you don't have all the time to do it, hire an analyst to do it for you, but like comb the market. Like I've found primetime properties on CoStar, on the market, and somebody is just assuming that it's all overpriced. You actually got to look at the data and comb through it and make your own decision whether it meets your threshold or not. There's still a lot of value add apartments that are there if you underwrite it properly. And so I would say that CoStar, MLS, brokerage network, as well as subscribing to websites like we mentioned and keeping in the loop. They always do like newsletters. Urban, like there's a lot of different ones for your different asset types, but keeping in the loop. I don't know if that answers the question. So.
What are some of the good websites like for financing? I like to kind of keep, because I think like Real Deal and Curb are good on the real estate side, but for the financing side, to kind of keep track on how financing is evolving, what are some of those kind of websites that you guys use?
Well, I think one locally is LA Business Journal. Like that's a great information, which kind of covers more the development, but also covers some of the business side of it, which sometimes the financing is. Andrew, what about you with financing? I know as a developer, you're always looking for money, both debt and equity. What's some of the things that you're seeing out there as far as opportunity with financing?
Some of the things is to get on the newsletters with the different brokers that they have. They announce different closings that they've had. You start to get an idea. Also, just like talking about driving down the street, when you see it says financed by Bank of Omaha or it says financed by this, call them, ask them what they did on that project. What was the rate? What was the term? What kind of balance sheet were you looking for? What kind of personal guarantee you were looking for? We have a really interesting thing that's happening right now in the marketplace. It's very exciting, particularly for us. You don't have to be this big old giant institutional player to actually start getting some really interesting construction debt. So you have groups like BlackRock coming in. You have groups like Goldman Sachs who bought Genesis. You have Anchor Loans. You have, I was even talking to the group that's sponsoring this. What's that called? Civic. And they seem to be aggressive on their terms. These groups are coming to the point to where the banks are saying, no, we need to have a higher rate. And it's actually kind of like, wait.
It's so close.
It's so close. Why am I going to go through hoops and jumps and crazy things to get a construction loan when these other groups have non-recourse debt with some bad boy carve-outs? I wouldn't say they're completely lax, but they're a little more lax. It's definitely easier on the loan draws and on the underwriting. They really underwrite the asset and the experience. So it's creating a really unique opportunity. So today I got a term sheet from one of those that I mentioned for 7.5% at 75% loan to cost, and I can go probably back and maybe get closer to 7 if I want. And I wouldn't say you're always going to get that. You have to start off and build it up, but the fact that it's getting that close, it's so close. It's remarkable. It's remarkable. Like this actually poses a great opportunity for all of us.
And I'll second that. So we did just close a loan with Civic, and it was so competitive and compelling, and it was a creative acquisition strategy. So they had to be very sophisticated to understand it, and the guys there are so sophisticated. They also run with Wedgwood, which is a big another type of business. But another way that we do it is I've worked with HFF a lot. And it's kind of like a loan brokerage company. And so what you do is you provide all your information to them. And what they do is they actually source it out to maybe 3, 4, 5 of the local banks. And it allows them to formally compete against each other. Because there's an element that if you submit all your stuff to a bank and then you submit it to another bank, it's almost like you're kind of cheating on them, kind of leading them on, kind of spinning their wheels, if you will. But if you're using a brokerage firm, that is expected, and it's the best terms win. And so we've used HFF, we've used Peak Corporate Finance as well, and we've gotten great results. I don't know if you use that. First we started with local banks, but then we went to that route.
I got on the opportunity zone in particular. It's one of the things I haven't really looked at is financing on that, because clearly there's kind of some unique holding periods and stuff with these opportunity zone projects because of all the tax benefits. What's going on with financing? Is there any special needs on that, or is it all just standard construction or long-term hold financing?
Actually, clarification came October 19th that debt was allowed. And it seems like an obvious thing. Well, how could you not have debt? But they actually made it very clear that as part of a project, there isn't going to be any kind of carve-out for debt. That's a really important part of the discussion.
Can you talk a little more about that? Because there's a component of how much you have to spend if you buy it, the asset.
What do you mean how much you have
to get the opportunity zone benefit, how much if you buy it for $1, you have to spend $1, I think it's that.
Oh, there's something called a substantial improvement clause, okay? And so that was also just recently clarified. So let's say you spend $5 million, the fund buys a piece of property in an opportunity zone, $5 million. They have to substantially improve the value of that property, but the building, not the land. So that's a pretty big deal. So let's say building's $3 million, land is $2 million. They have to put over a 30-month period of time $3 million into that development. Okay, so they have to double the value, but it's not with the land. Did you have a question?
Do they have to double the value financially by how much they put in it, or just by the actual equity growth? So is it increasing $3 million because of, the market may change due to this influx of money. So are you looking strictly at equity growth, whether it be funds put into the property or just the market change? Or is that you need to put $3 million of actual cash into this property?
Excellent question. It's the latter. You have to put cash in that. And the reason is because they don't want people to realize capital gains, take the deferral, not pay taxes, get some tax benefit, and then not do anything with it. So that's a really good question.
Jason, you mentioned earlier about ADUs. When I think about, again, following the money, I think that's something that the state has done to incur, some kind of development, more infill stuff. Can you talk about what that means and from an ADU perspective? I know there's some investors out here that are looking into that. Like, what kind of opportunity has that law created?
Yeah, sure. So it's very interesting. So what that does is you have a series of different types of zoning, one specifically being like a R1 zone. That's typically like for single family homes, right? And you can only usually have one unit on that property, right? What they've done is they've created an ordinance to allow you to build a second dwelling unit. It's actually called an ancillary dwelling unit, and it allows you to give some certain variances for the setbacks and the FAR requirements to make it quite easy. Actually, it's specifically in Los Angeles, but so what that means to you guys, if you guys have a rental that you have, like a single family home, say for instance, you bought an old, the oldest home on the best block, right? And you hire a GC, and you tell the GC, hey, I want to invest $200,000 into the renovation, but I also want you to put in $100,000 and put in a kitchen and fix up that garage. Because my house right now, only on appraisal for the house is $1,000, but that garage, man, it's 400 feet, and I can't get it on the appraisal. But you can actually convert it to an ADU. When you sell it, you can put that on the appraisal. And you've just added like 30% value on your property right there. So it's a very strategic way as an investor yourself, whether you're doing like a portfolio investment of doing 10 homes at a time. Some developers do. We do like clusters of similar product, but it would be good for an individual. I was talking with Kyle earlier. We were talking about the emergence of Airbnb, right? Pretty fascinating stuff. Imagine you buy a home, renovate it, put an ADU and Airbnb both. Bam! You've just created like it's just printing money for you. So it's quite interesting, this ordinance, and it allows you to add a density because LA is a very horizontal landscape. And so they're trying to figure out ways to create density without, us pulling our hairs out. So one of the ways is doing an ADU. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of how I think about it.
We approved an ADU. We have an ordinance as well, so in Long Beach you can do ADU as well. Because I think there's minimum lot size of 8,500 square foot lots, but if you meet those requirements, you can do it almost by right now.
It's controversial. So I will just say one of the reasons that this came about is because the state looked at housing requirements, and in many cities, communities push back against increased density. And so this is a way to do an end run around it. But it's controversial because, just like he was saying, people are potentially going to Airbnb those ADUs, and it's going to have an impact on the community. So it's a sticky topic. So I would say know that community. You don't want to be known as the person who's going in doing all this, and then when you come in and you have a project that you really want to get done, and then people say, wait, I know what that guy was doing in our neighborhood. He was creating all these ADUs, and then they started becoming Airbnbs, and look what he's doing. You just have to kind of, I don't know, always continue to have that big picture perspective. I mean, I totally get what you're saying. This is just why it's controversial.
Go ahead.
I think that's a great point. I think in Anaheim, because of the hospitality market there, what we had a lot of investors kind of start buying properties, converting rooms, putting like bunk beds, and it was just becoming a big issue with with quality of life and having them do this in residential neighborhoods. And actually, the city kind of adopted a moratorium that actually prevented folks from doing that. And a lot of investors kind of lost a lot of money. So I think it's being able to. I think Carolyn, you're absolutely right. Making sure you understand the community that you're investing in, and for the ADUs, I think it's still something that's being looked at. There'll be challenges, but I think communities like Los Angeles and Long Beach, where it's welcome, it's been adopted, is kind of areas where you can follow the money.
Where's Long Beach on short-term rentals?
That's something that, of course, we're going to have the Olympics come to Los Angeles, and we're having 13 events in Long Beach. So we're going to be the largest second Olympic village outside of Los Angeles, and we are trying to develop a lot of hotels right now. And so the council is going to be grappling with short-term rentals probably in the next year to 2 years. And it's I think there's arguments to be made for and against. I think the hospitality market is changing. I think just like with Uber, the parking in cars, that landscape is changing. But I think for cities, hotels actually represent a major source of TOT, or transit-oriented tax, that it helps fund police officers, street lights, community services. And when you have short-term rentals, sometimes that reporting those taxes don't get back to cities. So you have to understand kind of where cities stand from that standpoint. And so I think it'll be a very difficult conversation, a very political conversation in Long Beach.
I can tell you what happened in our town. We banned it. So Hermosa Beach. And so the bigger picture for us in Hermosa Beach was is that it's already so expensive to live in Hermosa Beach. But if you can create an environment where somebody can now monetize a residential property and basically treat it like a hotel, then the cost of housing in Hermosa Beach is going to be even higher. But then also it has impacts on the neighborhood, because what would happen is that people would move out, there'd be trash everywhere, they'd be partying, and so it would have impacts on the neighborhood. There's also kind of this fairness part of it, because they're not required to comply with ADA or fire code or anything like that, and they're just basically doing their own little pop-up hotel. But on the other side of it is that there's a community north of us, and I can't remember which one it is, but coastal community. They actually approved short-term rentals, but the way it was going to work was the person who owned it had to live there. And so actually it was kind of really interesting, because what you don't want is speculators going in, buying property in Hermosa Beach, and then just doing short-term rentals. So there in that beach community, they said, okay, you can do it, but you're going to have to actually live there. So then it was approved by the Coastal Commission, because the Coastal Commission has this thing about wanting to allow affordable housing up and down the coast, or affordable accommodations like hotels and things like that. And so what happens is they kind of hold that against a city, and they say, well, if you want something from us, then you need to give us our low-cost hotels on the coastline. So they actually approved this short-term rental ordinance in that town because they had that clause as part of it. And then I think also the issue is collecting the transient occupancy tax, is having the city actually get some money off of all of this.
Yeah, and I would like to add, so those are all good points, I think, when it comes to Airbnb being appropriate for different cities. Not all cities would work. I worked in the hospitality industry, so I get the reciprocity between providing that to help with infrastructure costs and safety. But I think the premise, similar to CEQA with good intentions, is that it allows for single families and young families to be able to buy a home and lower their mortgage payments by renting out, right? So like my family specifically, my aunt takes care of my grandma, right? And so my brother and I are going to build an ADU in his home so that my mom could live there, right? And so there's also that portion of it too. And so I think there's two sides of the coin, it's like, hey, does it allow people that wouldn't normally be able to afford a single family home to buy one? It helps, right? Also when, I come from a Latin family, like that's what we usually do. You take care of your mom or your dad, when they're older. Then there's also the business side of things. So it's really an interesting topic, and it is controversial, and there's flip sides to it all, but it's something that you should know about and put it into your investment notes so that you can understand it.
Can I talk specifically about the city of Los Angeles regarding the Airbnbs? There's a draft ordinance right now. You can read it if you go to the planning department website. And it's along the vein of the community that was adjacent to Hermosa that you're referring to, where they're banning short-term rentals for non-owner occupants. And people that are owner-occupied, they have a limit up to 120 days. But they can go up to 180s if they go through a variance process, as similar to a conditional use permit. It hasn't been adopted yet. There's getting a lot of controversy. There's a lot of controversy as whether you can have nuances to it. They're trying to ban people from being able to have one in an accessory dwelling unit, which they had just passed a law. And but there's people that are looking at workarounds, like keeping things rented for 30 plus days, right? I've done an Airbnb here and there, and some of the best rentals I had were like for 3 or 4 months from somebody that come in and for work, and that was very profitable. So we're gonna see how it falls and where it lands, and it's a tough decision for these cities too, because these are big numbers because they do have that occupancy tax, and Airbnb does collect it, and Airbnb does pay that to the city, right? And so there's some big numbers that Los Angeles has been posting to their general ledger, and that's a large portion of it is potentially just gonna disappear. And there's a lot of reasons, there's a lot of arguments on either side, and so we're gonna see how it all falls out.
All right, so we got about, I got a question. Go ahead.
A little off topic, but the view between the state with affordable housing, new governor, they talked about 500,000 units, 700,000 units a year versus local control. In essence, it's kind of like setting up a fight between local control versus state legislators, trying to afford that program. What's your view on that, and what do you see coming down the pipe?
Yeah, Carol, I think this one's right up your alley. Their question, just in case everyone heard it, is that basically part of the plan is to add all these additional units but at a state level, but they want to give local control, and there seems to be a conflict there. Why don't you talk about that?
Thus, ADUs were born. Because, and this is why there's the whole ADU conversation, because basically cities have been forced to accept ADUs and create a policy that allows them by right, because the state is pushing for more housing and the cities are pushing back. And one of the things to keep in mind from just a really big picture perspective is that, so cities have infrastructure, and that infrastructure was laid down, let's say, in Hermosa Beach. So the sewer infrastructure was laid down in the 20s, and the electrical grid was laid down, right around that time period. That was based upon a certain population. So let's say the state comes in and says, you know what, I want you to cram 25% more people into your city. Well, our sewer system actually isn't designed to handle it. Right now, we have issues with our electrical grid today because there's so much more draw for power, even though there's ways that we've been conserving, but it becomes an infrastructure issue for cities. And so cities have that, people who work in cities have that perspective in mind. It has been a huge fight because cities push back and the state pushes back and tries to push things and make it all by right. So somebody just go to a counter and build what they want to build. And it's just a constant clash. There's actually something called RENA standards, and basically the state has prescribed enforced housing mandates on all of the cities, and if the cities don't meet those housing numbers, then they're going to be fined. And so that's another big fight between the city and local jurisdictions. So that's there's no answers, it's just a big fight. But Sergio probably has more information on it too.
Yeah, definitely. It's so interesting because I think I think growing up working for cities, I really believe that cities and local communities know what's best for their own, what makes up their communities. And I think that the state level, and we saw it with redevelopment. When redevelopment was taken away, I think because of the Bell scandal with the city manager pay kind of sparked kind of a real kind of a firestorm that I think impacted, unfortunately, cities in a very negative way. And it really highlighted kind of redevelopment agencies that were abused. And I think it was very, like we talked earlier, there's always bad apples. But overall, a lot of cities were actually building affordable housing with redevelopment funds. And you see, I think, a correlation. Since 2012, we've seen a spike in homelessness. That's because cities have lost a resource to pay for building affordable housing. As real estate prices have increased, you're not having a steady supply of affordable housing being built. But I really think that over the next couple of years, I think it'll be very interesting to see how this governor, hopefully he will kind of reach out to cities and hopefully have good progressive dialogue about what works, what doesn't work, and hopefully use that for policy making up Sacramento.
Do you have a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so, Carol, is there a national website to find out about opportunity zones, opportunities outside of California? Is there a national site, or is it city-based?
Yeah. Oh, there's no question. Just Google it. I mean, there is reams of information. Easy to find.
California actually has the state of California has a great website that actually provides a good overview. That was just kind of released maybe about a month ago. That actually provided a good overview, but I think for outside Texas, a lot of states actually have set up websites that is what we've been hearing, pretty good websites. So decide whatever state you're interested in. Google opportunity zones in Texas and Florida. You'll probably come up with a wealth of information.
There is a website called oppsites.com, oppsites.com, and they are actually going to be the marketplace that's been approved by the state of California, the online marketplace for opportunity zone properties. So to match up buyers and sellers. So I would say take a look at OppSites as well. OppSites, oppsites.com, marketplace.
For the opportunity zones, you mentioned that it has to be a fund that purchases the property. Does the fund need to come from multiple people, or can I just take my own capital gains from a house that I sell or something like that and create my own personal fund and go buy a property with that? Or do I have to involve other people?
Money has to flow through a fund, and the fund has to meet administrative guidelines. And so you could form your own fund, but you need to know how to run it, and you need to know how to meet those guidelines, because if you don't meet those guidelines, you're not going to get the tax benefit.
And is there a minimum threshold? Like the fund has to be at least $1 million or $500,000 or $10,000?
No, the fund is going to set what their thresholds are.
But there has to be, doesn't he have a maximum amount of the fund he can own? Does he have to have other investors in the fund, or can he just do it all on his own?
He could do it all on his own, but you better know how to meet with all those compliance standards. But you can do it all on your own. I mean, the issue when it comes to related parties has to do with sale of property and things like that. But he can create his own fund, as long as you know what you're doing.
With your attorney, yeah.
Yeah, the beauty of the program is that it's all self-certification, so I think it's the one advice that we've been telling kind of folks, because I think in Long Beach, one of the things that we want to make sure is also, equality, and making sure that not only kind of the big developers are getting this opportunity, but also small developers that are looking to kind of take on that next level. And we're advising, make sure that you're meeting with a good real estate tax attorney, and a good CPA that understands opportunity zones, but all of it is self-certification. So I think, I know earlier talking with Andrew, a lot of investors are kind of going into it and saying, hey, I'm just going to treat these fund, it's a complete separate fund, it's going to be all for separate to the rest of my portfolio, so that if the IRS comes and says, hey, you did this incorrectly, it's all self-certification. So that's kind of the beauty, I think, that President Trump kind of set this up to really facilitate investment in low-income communities. So hopefully it's taken advantage of.
All right, so we got about 5 minutes left here. Let's kind of end because, part of the thing that we talked about at the conference is a general feeling that we're kind of getting towards the end of this cycle, right? We've been on a nice run here for 10 years. So talk about, over the next 10 years, kind of, and Jason, you can go first. Where do you see opportunity, and maybe where do you see risk, and how is that impacting the investing that you're doing right now?
It's a good question. I just recently, I stay pretty close to USC, and I go to the Lusk Center, multifamily conference every year. And if anybody's interested in the data, I can email it to them. But just interesting nationally, there was about 2 million units that are needed to get with demand nationally, right? And the data states that 200,000 units are needed for California, and only half of that was provided. And so you could see that in just simple, supply and demand on rents. Like, aren't rents pretty crazy in your area? Aren't costs pretty high right now? So if you were to have only one beer, you can sell it for $5, right? But if you had 100 beers, you can only sell each one for $1, right? So it's right now I see an interesting opportunity because there's still a need for housing, right? There's still a need for people to grow their, I personally have 2 children. My brother has 2 children. And I have 5 best friends, and we all have together is 20 kids. And they're all under 3 years old, right? 3 years ago, there were none. And so interesting that that's happening right now. And I went from a 1-bedroom to 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom. So that's happening all across the country, right? And that's just a fact. You can look at the statistics. I can share it with you. And so what I'm specifically looking at is providing more smaller units rather than less bigger units, because I do see that the market is slowing down. Construction has gone up. Interest prices have gone up. And 2008, 9, 10, there's been credit default swap, Ponzi scheme, deck of cards fell. The federal government put all these, regulations on Wall Street. So all the loans that are being provided right now are super regulated. So I don't think there's going to be a catastrophic dip. I do see a plateau. But if you think and invest wisely, I think you'll be able to have a good run in the next 2-3 years. So that's it.
Andrew, what about you? What are you doing? What are you focused on?
I'm looking at projects related to similar constructs of being able to rent them, right? My backstop, rent them. There's a huge opportunity in underserved parts of Los Angeles that haven't had apartments. I had the ability to meet somebody who bought one of the original fourplexes I built in Boyle Heights. And, they were so happy. They were like, thank you so much for selling that to us. I'm like, well, you're welcome. I made a lot of money. But we got rents for $2,400 and $2,600, and he's got those rents up to $3,000, right? And just because the area's gotten a little cooler, but it's a massive supply constraint. Nobody's really been building stuff there in Boyle Heights, right? So there's these opportunities that are there. I'm interested in them. I'm also interested in some of the projects that where people are going to build out this huge small lot subdivision project, and we're going to sell it for $1 million each or $800,000. I want to buy those at a really, really good price, and I want to underwrite them to rent. And if the market comes there and I can sell them and I can give somebody a really good product. Now, I don't want to sell things for $1 million right now. I want to sell things between $600,000 to $900,000 to $800,000, because I think that's a place where 2 people that are a couple right now, they're paying that much in just rent as what would a typical mortgage would be. So you kind of look at these, how do I offset my risk if things really went crazy and something were to happen, but I don't see that happening. I see there's a good window. I think the super higher end is definitely going to have some big challenges. And some of those folks who are really aggressive, and hopefully they can just hold their breath right on some of the projects. But I think that where there's affordability, it's really important. I love what you talked about, being able to build more single units. One area that I'm exploring aggressively is tiny homes. In the ordinance that the city of Los Angeles has for the accessory dwelling units, they're allowing to have homes on trailers. To me, that's a game changer. Imagine someone can rent out there in my backyard, bring a trailer in with a cool place, and rent something out. Now, it might piss off some neighbors, but guess what? That might be their cousin. That might be somewhere. That might be, themselves. I mean, I like that opportunity that's being changed. The mindset's changed, right? People's minds are going to change. The younger generation is going to come in, and it's going to be more fluid. It's going to be more connected. It's going to be more internet-based, right? So creating those opportunities and thinking about them, I think it's a great. Sacramento is on the cusp of approving tiny homes. Portland has approved tiny homes. Fresno has tiny homes that are approved. The idea of RV parks are actually becoming cool, which is wild, right? So I think that there's pockets that are out there for just average investors. I think there's pockets that are out there for folks that have these deep relationships on the development side that are coming up. And I think affordability.
Carolyn, a bit of a twist on the question, because I know how much you're focused on opportunity zones. I mean, yeah, there's money, there's people looking for the tax play, but you still have to make a smart real estate investment. Where are the funds? What types of projects are they looking for? Are they building homes? Are they building retail? Where is that money going? Where do you see that money going throughout these different projects that you represent?
Right now, funds have been talking about other parts of the country, not coming here. And really it could be any project. I mean, housing, but they're not necessarily right now coming here, even though a lot of funds are forming. Now on another note, just kind of to trail on to what they were saying is that what I see happening in the future of California has very aggressive greenhouse gas emission goals that have a clock ticking to the year 2040. And so in California, it is all about density. And so density centered around these transit-oriented corridors, like we've been talking about, that's where a lot of the ability just to create a lot of, whatever we're talking about with tiny homes or whatever it is, but all of the focus is going to go to those areas where mass transit is going to be. Because if people can hop on light rail or hop on whatever, right? If they're not driving, that's going to allow the state of California to get to their greenhouse gas emissions goals. So never lose sight of the fact that California, from its environmental perspective, is so focused on getting cars off the road. And so, I think right now there's already been a pretty high uptick in these transit-oriented development areas, but it's going to probably keep expanding as the mass transit expands.
Sergio, what about you?
Yeah.
City of Long Beach, excuse me. What's the next 10 years look like for you guys?
I think we're really excited because I think there's several factors that are they are going to continue to play, no matter, I think, what happens with the economy. Like I had mentioned, the Olympics are coming, so we are kind of gearing up the whole tourism district and entertainment district. We have a site that's about 30 acres that's on the water. We're actually going to be kicking off a new plan to re-envision our entire waterfront. The Long Beach waterfront is actually the same size as San Francisco, Vancouver, and San Diego, and people don't know about it because we just have super blocks. So we're going to look to see how we can develop and bring residential, commercial, office to the waterfront. So that's going to be a game changer. We're also going to try to attract a sports team to Long Beach. So a lot of people think that Long Beach is a small city, but actually it has a population about just under 500,000 people. So that's larger than the population in Miami, Atlanta. And so we really, I think in these next 10 years, are really going to try to take our position in California as downtown on the water, similar to San Diego and San Francisco. So I would definitely expect big things to come out of Long Beach. And I think with all the investment that's happening, it's going to, the momentum is just there to continue to be a driver. And we're really trying to just build those economic engines. Tourism, we have a big project at the Queen Mary, about 65 acres around the Queen Mary to bring entertainment district. Right now it's one of the hottest places in Southern California to go see a concert. Every weekend there's a concert, a pretty cool concert happening at the Queen Mary, and we're just going to build that, bringing 2 hotels to that site. And second in PCH on the other side of town near Ballast Point Brewery. That whole area we're going to be revisioning, and it's going to be really cool. So expect to see really cool things at a regional context come from Long Beach.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Can I get a round of applause for these guys?
I know that, David, it's like a no sales pitch environment, but one of the things that I wanted to just point out, of the people that were here, can you raise your hands again who had gone to the conference this weekend? How awesome was that? Right? It was crazy awesome. I've been to other conferences and other education sessions. It was also a no sales pitch environment. People were just dropping knowledge. It was great. And I wanted to just give you like a big props, and you partnered with, what was the group? Cash Flow Connections, and it was just first class all the way through. I can't wait to look at this. I wasn't able to go on Saturday to look at the video of all the different sessions, and I called up about 5 of my investors and said, hey, I'm buying you tickets for next year, because it was that valuable. So I just wanted to let you guys know, kind of played it like it was down a little bit, but this was like a really amazing event. I learned a tremendous amount from this event.
It's awesome, man. Thank you. Yeah, we don't sell anything, but you can sell FIBI. That's cool. Don't worry about it. So, all right. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up. They're cleaning up right now. What we're going to do is we want you to continue to network. In case you haven't been here before, North Italia is right across the courtyard here. We have the whole patio rented. There should be food out actually in about 3 more minutes. So if you leave, there's a hallway behind this wall here. There's a door, and then there's a door behind that. That's the back entrance. You don't have to walk all the way out to the front. Again, we're dark in December. But we do have the all-chapter networking event in Long Beach, so we hope to see you there, and if not, we'll see you in January. Thank you much.